Good afternoon. Welcome to the first Torah study of the spring 2022 semester. Today we'll be talking about gambling in honor of the upcoming Super Bowl, which I think makes a lot of sense. So it just coincidentally, in yesterday's New York Times, there was an opinion article, discussing the ethical or the moral ideas that now that sports betting is legal in many, many states. So here you have it. It's from the legalized gambling free-for-all, New York Times, that there's no oversight. And there were 2 points that I wanted to just use that New York Times opinion piece as a springboard for. Number one is that the writer of this opinion piece says something interesting. All losers need to believe they're one mega long shot away from getting whole. Okay, and then the next point he says, which is very interesting, in the past 5 years there's been an explosion in sports betting, which has coincided with an increased interest in cryptocurrencies, resurgence in sports memorabilia, trading cards market, and even Robinhood. All these things are forms of gambling. So that's a very strong statement, that any time you take a risk, that's gambling. And that is true, but they're not synonyms. Risk and gambling are not inherently synonyms. So I want to just take a look at it from a Torah perspective, just what our approach to this should be. So let's just start from the beginning. So the first source, which is really I think starts from, is the Torah says you may not have an evil person, in Hebrew a rasha, to be a witness. Right? So there are people who are disqualified from being witnesses in court. So one of them, so the Talmud, the Mishnah says, who are these people who are disqualified? So they're, again, obviously, if you're, that's again a whole discussion of itself, like felons or of the type. But here we're talking about people who are, you would not have imagined that they're evil people. They're right. That's the point. If they were just inherently evil, you'd know who they were. So it says and there are 4 people: one who plays with dice, one who lends money with interest, and those who fly pigeons, which is also a form of gambling, and merchants who trade in the produce of the sabbatical year. So the last one is like a religious law. Every 7 years, the land of Israel has to lay fallow. Everyone can't work the land. A very religious law. Someone who breaks that law, fine. Number 2 is also sort of religious law, but it's also part of economics, which is according to the Bible, and Christians and Jews practice this till today. And Muslims, all 3, that usury, which is lending money and interest, is forbidden. How our modern economic system works, both in Islam, both in Judaism, both in Christianity, has been, it's it's something you could study for years, because every society needs money to flow. That's how, even it's not capitalism, but you need a free market in some way. So Christian society had a big problem, how you deal with it. They dealt with it that the Jews were the money lenders. Jewish society had a problem, how they dealt with it in amongst themselves. And Islam had a very big problem how to set up banks until today. Those who are religious Muslims deal with this prohibition. And in fact, there was a conference a few years ago in Harvard Law School, discussing the history of the three monotheistic religions, how they all dealt with this prohibition. So again, but someone who we know is transgressing, he is an evil person. Now again, he's not an evil person, he's a banker. Not commenting whether bankers are evil, that wouldn't be, obviously would never do such a thing. But the first and the third are gamblers. So it says here, those who play with dice and those who fly pigeons. So what's so bad? Why are gamblers Russia? Why are they evil people in the eyes of the Talmud of the Bible? So Rabbi Yehuda said, it's actually because, sorry. Let's just go to the next page. It's easier on the next page, top of page 2. So the Talmud asks, why? What is he doing wrong? So Rami Bar Chama, the first opinion is, because you're actually stealing. Why are we stealing? So if you think the Bengals are going to win because you really think their quarterback is the greatest, and I think the Rams are going to win because I think it's Stafford's turn. He's been suffering in Detroit. It's not like it's not like a roll of the dice. I really believe that I understand football. I really believe that I know something. So when I bet, I'm betting based. I don't really think I'm going to lose. It's not. With dice, it's a little easier. Like, really, do you really think that you have a chance? But So the Talmud seems to, according to this opinion, every time you gamble, you don't really think you're going to lose. So therefore, when I tell you that I'm going to, so let's say, right, if the Rams win, I'll give you $100, and if the Bengals win, you give me $100, right? So when I made that claim that I will do something, it wasn't wholehearted. And therefore, if you take my money, you're stealing. Because when I lose, I don't really want to give it to you. Because when I promised to give it to you, I didn't really mean it. So in Judaism, when you promise something, it's not binding, and therefore it's like stealing because you're taking money because I said so, but really it wasn't we would say in the law school, not a binding contract. And therefore it's like you're stealing from me. But I'm going to pay because I'm not a bad person, but you're taking the money really is like a form of stealing. So therefore gambling is really not a degenerate like activity, it's just that you're stealing. Rav Shesha says no, that's not true. At the end of the day, especially with dice are chance. And you know as well as I know that you could win and I could win. I say also football. Do you really know like what's going to be? Like you can't, you think you might know, but you don't really know. Well, 1 second. So therefore it's not because you're stealing. Because we all know that we can lose and we're giving the money freely. But you know what it is? You're doing something that's not productive in society. You're not a productive person, you're gambling. So this says, so what's the practical difference? Either way, so the Gemara says, if you have another occupation, if you're a normal part of society and you gamble on the side, so if it's stealing, so stealing is bad. But if it's because you're not part of society, if you gamble and you have a job, and this is not your only income, or it's for the fun of it, or we're all sitting around watching, so this is not a problem. So if it's the first reason, everyone's forbidden. If it's the second reason, it's only professional gamblers who they don't contribute to the world in any way, shape, or form. There was a question?
So my question is that I beg to differ.
With the Talmud? You beg to differ with the Talmud.
Well, no.
Sorry.
Dice truly are a gamble. You're going to roll that and you don't know. But with a football team, you're right, you don't fully know. But especially this year, I don't know if you're following it, there is a home team field advantage.
Right.
You know that some players are better than others. You know that their records. You know
it's more of an educated gamble.
Right. So I don't compare the two to being.
So you're right. So again, what you're asking is that the way we gamble in the Super Bowl is sort of would actually give weight to the first opinion, which is you really think you know. You really think you understand sports. You really think when you place a bet. And therefore, in a way, it would make it worse that even according to the first opinion, you should be forbidden today. Okay, yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes, it would make it worse.
More of stealing
because you really didn't commit to it because you thought you were going to win. Now we'll get to why it was also different today also.
Okay, but with the first opinion, you're saying that we don't hold promises to actually do. But then why do we have such a whole big thing on bleeding and we have to...
Correct. So correct. That means from a Jewish perspective, you have to fulfill your promise. But on the other hand, when I promise to give you money, since it's not legally binding, so then if you come and collect it from me, in other words, you're taking money that I really didn't want to give you. You know that I didn't want to give you. Now, is it outright stealing? Is it actually that you have my money illegally? Could be not. But that's why it's like a form of stealing, and that's why, again, it could be, it might even be enforceable or in court, but it's considered a form of stealing because you're taking something that you know that really deep down I didn't want to give you. And that's the tefet of a smachta. So how do we? So I want. This is those are the two famous opinions. What does the Jewish law say based on this Talmud? So Maimonides is of the opinion that it's. If you have it at the bottom of the page, I have it italicized. This is robbery, according to the rabbinic decree. Although he himself consents, since he's taking it right, it's considered robbery. So Maimonides feel like the first opinion, that it's robbery because you don't really intend to give. However, the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, disagrees or agrees with the Maimonides, but the Ramah, which is from the Ashkenazi standpoint, at the top of page 3, he says he follows a second opinion, and therefore, if someone has another profession besides gambling, he is not invalid, meaning it's not illegal to get. Doesn't invalidate you as a witness. It doesn't make you an evil person if you gamble, if you have another profession. This custom has already spread to follow the second approach. And therefore you can play dice. Because again, you have a job, I have a job, we can go gamble. because we're not evil people because we contribute to the world. We're part of the way of the world. And then it's even clearer in the other source, which is here on the bottom, where it says, when does this apply? When they play with cash up front. So, look, for example, if you go to a casino, you can listen, let me gamble, and if I owe you money at the end, I'll pay you. That's not how casinos work. Or that's not how DraftKings works. How do DraftKings or FanDuel work? You put your money in ahead of time. In other words, when I gamble with you about the game and we promise to pay each other $100, there's a very big problem. And like you both pointed out, it could be that it's a question of promising and do I owe you? But what if at the head of time you go to FanDuel? The only way FanDuel will allow you to gamble is if you put your money in ahead of time, right? You have to deposit money. When you go to the casino, you give them your actual cash and you get coin, chips. And at the end, if you have more chips, you can get cash back. So before you gamble, you've already given up your money. Correct? If you go to FanDuel today, you first put in your $10 and then you gamble. So in a way, you've already given out your money before gambling. So if the whole problem of gambling is that I'm taking money which you don't want to give me because you lost even though you thought you would win, that doesn't apply when you go gamble in a casino. It doesn't apply when you gamble on FanDuel because you've already given them the dollar.
Which is the same thing with stock market now.
So that's how we started. So the question is, we'll talk about stock market in a second. But so the Ramah says, and this is again in the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat. He says here on bottom of page 3, source 4, note 4. He says when they play with cash up front, but if they play with trusting the winner will pay, the winner cannot extract payment in court. But if the money is pre-prepared on the board, which is another way of saying is you gave your money ahead of time to the bookie. Now, which would, by the way, which interestingly enough, would be a reason that Judaism would support, FanDuel and sports betting legally, because until now it was a bookie. And what did you do with the bookie? You called in your bet, and then you'd pay up afterwards, which would be, according to the Shulchan Aruch, would be a problem. But according to everybody, seemingly, if you put money ahead, then you've already given up your money. You've already spent your money. Now. Right? But this is, again, so this is seemingly the approach that definitely Ashkenazi Jewry following this opinion. There are Sephardic Jews who follow the opinion of Shulchan Aruch that it is considered stealing. But again, in a way like in a casino where you buy chips to play with, there is a case to be made that it's not stealing. So, just to recap very quickly, seemingly from here, and this is on top of page 4, you have from a 1996 speech from Rabbi Mordechai Willig, a rabbi in Riverdale, who says it's a good idea to refrain based on Maimonides, because the Rambam does say that it's stealing, but he admitted that many Ashkenazic authorities, like we see, hold that it's not a problem, but he says it's not a good idea. So it comes out of, based on what we said in a really quick nutshell, that based on the Talmud's explanation of why gambling is a problem, that it's a form of stealing, or people are not involved with setting up the world, both of those wouldn't apply to the casual Super Bowl gambler, especially according to Ashkenazi tradition, especially where you give your money ahead of time, and therefore it wouldn't be a form of stealing, and it wouldn't be that you're not contributing to the world. But again, now I want to talk about from like a moral and ethical standpoint, not from the legal standpoint. Yes?
What about all these Super Bowl, what do they call them, when you buy boxes?
Right.
For charity, though. Because as far as contributing to the world, so many organizations do them.
Right. So this was actually Rabbi Willig was speaking about, quoting other rabbis, that bingo nights at your church or your synagogue or things like that would be frowned upon, because all gambling would be frowned upon. That's what we're going to get to in a second. Okay. That even though yes, there is a positive. The church or the synagogue is making money, or the charity, there's still an inherent negative, and that's let's see that for a second. So again, it's a little bit off topic, but the Talmud said something. Again, we said that charging interest, here's $100, pay back $110, is forbidden according to Jewish law, according to the Bible. Rabbi Yehuda said, you may lend your child money on interest. And some read it actually that the parents either the parent is lending to his children and the children pay interest, or the vice versa, that the parent is borrowing and then will pay their child interest. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? It's a biblical verse, do not charge interest. So he's doing it not for interest. He's doing it to educate them. Yeah. So it says, it's very interesting. This is a very interesting educational piece of the Talmud, where it says, in order for them to taste the taste of interest. So let's go according to the opinion that we're talking about the father goes to his son or daughter, says, here's $100, I know you need it, please pay me back $110. So even though normally you may not charge interest, he's doing it because, after the first time you pay credit card, you go into debt, you realize how bad debt is. I think we all agree to that. So it would be a good thing for parents to educate their children. Look, this is what happens at interest. Now, I'm not the bank. I'm not going to come repossess your house. So I'm charging you interest for your benefit.
Isn't it also to your benefit, like if your adult child is not making what they need to make, I'll pay you, but you're going to pay me back because you have to understand that you have
right, yeah, exactly. So the Talmud's point is not responsibility, but to understand, to stay away from it. But the Talmud says don't do it, it's not a good idea. Because people become corrupted. Now, this is actually unclear what is it, right? If you take a look at how does Maimonides explain this? It is forbidden for a person to even borrow money from his sons or daughters or to lend to them. Even if it's a present, so technically it's a present, so it's technically not interest, right? My dad's allowed to give me an extra $10. My daughter's allowed to give me an extra $10. So it's technically not interest; it's a present. Nevertheless, why it's forbidden? You might habituate them to this practice.
I agree.
And that means, in other words, and we would to make this into the 21st century is there's a. And this is, by the way, the other New York Times article on gambling, which is, there are two very nice articles in the past and recently in the opinion papers about sports betting, because in this time of year, there's always a percentage of people who have an addictive personality. Mm-hmm. Whether, nature, nurture, brain chemistry, whatever it may be. And for every 100 people, or every 100 sons and daughters who you try to teach them, 2 of them will become addicted. So even more than that, even people who don't have an addictive personality, but if in other words, when you give that teenage boy or girl their first shot and first drink, you don't know who's going to take to it. So when even though maybe the famous story of when I was a kid, smoking was a problem. So every once in a while there was a father's I want my kid to smoke, and cough up his lung, and he'll realize he'll never smoke again.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, if you try to do that, there's so many people who will fall down the rabbit hole or fall down this problem of getting into it. And now, this is actually brought out in another very interesting case in the Talmud, and that is totally, now it's a Shabbos law. So on Shabbos, a lot of things we don't do. So it's one of the things you don't do is you don't write and things like that. But then randomly it says a very interesting thing. You have your family around the table, and especially when you have these little kids, this is very common. Everyone wants the biggest slice of cake, or the biggest piece of Fogel, however you want to say it. You're allowed to draw lots at your table. You're allowed to raffle it off, or just lottery, okay? Big piece number, that's it. So the Mishnah says, at the top of page 5, a person may draw lots with his children and family members, as long as it's not bigger and smaller. But they have to be equal size.
So what are you drawing lots for?
So who gets first, who gets this one, whatever it may be. We'll see the Gemara will actually adjust it. And the same thing is true, you may cast lots for the priests in the temple for which foods they get. So the Gemara says, so what's the difference? If it's family members, what's the problem? So then the Gemara says, actually, you know what? When it comes to family members, you can do bigger and smaller. But wait a second. When you do bigger and smaller, it's not gambling, but it's a lottery. That means everyone puts their name in a hat, and then big piece goes to oldest child, or youngest child, or middle child, whoever it may be. And the Talmud says it goes back to that same question of interest. Just like you are allowed to charge interest to your child and vice versa, according to what we thought, to teach them lesson, therefore we're also allowed to do this lottery to teach them.
Not everything.
That life isn't fair, and but on this.
Why not just give it out? Life's not fair. You
Correct.
get this, you get this,
Okay,
you have to do
maybe
whatever.
these parents didn't want to take the responsibility of deciding. I don't know. You're asking a good question. So again, it says here in the bottom here, yes, is it indeed so? A person may draw lots with his children and family members, and even against small for big portion. But why then? If that's true, why not for non-family members? Right? The Talmud's going to ask. And the answer is because you know what? It is a form of gambling. What do you mean it's a form of gambling? At the end of the day, it's the three of us, right? We want the big. Who wants the biggest cookie, right? So according to this piece of Talmud, we are not allowed to have a lottery for the biggest cookie. But what's the problem? Come on, we're not gambling. We're not stealing from each other, right? We're all going to get a cookie, and we're not like destroying the fabric of society by just using a lottery system to see who gets it. So the Mishnah Berurah, which is the Chavetz Chaim, literally less than 100 years ago, about 100 years ago, even though there is no possibility of stealing, as all the food belongs to the family or the father, like in our situation, nevertheless it's forbidden. But because perhaps they will, after having utilized a lottery for food, utilize a lottery, why got left out, to gamble with others. And here we see that it's actually codified, that this idea that to stay away from gambling, even when it is absolutely not problematic, it's the three of us for the biggest cookie. Nevertheless, the Code of Jewish law in this instance, again, it's in a random place about the laws of Shabbos and how we eat our meals, says it is forbidden to use lotteries. So if it's just a family and it's just father and it's all his, even then, it's still not recommended. But for sure, strangers, because then you're getting the big one, I'm getting the small one. So you're getting more than me. So you're winning, technically. So here we see that there is this concept that on one hand, we want to, I don't want to say encourage gambling, we're allowed to gamble to teach how bad gambling is, but really what comes out of that, no, you can never do that, because getting involved in gambling can lead to horrific consequences, and therefore, even amongst family members, it's not recommended. Which is, most people don't, I think most people don't know this source, because it's not a typical gambling source. Now, what I get a lot, now I want to go back a second. So, we understand that the three of us fighting for the biggest cookie is not like the end of the world. It's not, and it's not stealing, and it's not against society. So, what is the problem? And therefore, I want to go back to risk-taking. People, again, what we started with on page 1 is the statement in yesterday's New York Times that all of these things are forms of gambling. Cryptocurrencies, Robinhood, stock market, day trading. And I want to make the point here, and that is, what are we afraid of? Risk. People will always take risks. When you buy stocks, you own something. It's yours. Yes, you're day trading. You're going to buy it at 10 and sell it at 11. Or at the end of the day, you're free of all positions. But for the time that you bought the stock, or even an option, a call, whatever it may be, you own something. It's yours. And if, God forbid, all the electricity went down, and somewhere, you would be stuck owning something. If your computer crashed, you own something. Is it risky? Is it a risky business? Yes. But the Talmud and the rabbis, they're not legislating risk. That was never the issue, that when you gamble, you're going into risky positions. So, therefore, when they said you're not contributing to the world, they weren't saying everyone should be a doctor or a lawyer to help people and use your talents for the good. That's true. No one's denying that as a very important thing to do, but that's not what the issue is. The issue was when it's all money out of nothing. Not money because you did a risky position. When you do day trading, at the end of the day, you're right. You really don't mean to own anything. But because technically you own a stock for an hour, for a minute, forever it may be, you're buying and selling. There is no difference between buying and selling stocks, tables, diamonds, horses, whatever it may be. Gambling is money for nothing. I mean, it's money being traded for nothing's sake. And that's where we enter the realm of, okay, what's the problem? So either it might be stealing because you're taking money for nothing, or because by trading money just because you said so and I said so and I promised and all that, that's where the issue comes about, that it's not a real thing, that you're not part of the world. But anyone who buys and sells real world commodities, even for a second, once they're involved in buying and selling, there's no legislation against that. So what is gambling? Gambling is exactly that. Making or losing something based on nothing. So why should you get the bigger cookie because your name came up first? So after all that, I wish everyone an enjoyable Super Bowl. If you're gonna gamble, please make sure to put the money into the bookie or to FanDuel way ahead of time. But
That's what I meant by the stop, if I may.
But again, I'm going to end with this, and then we'll get to the discussion. If better, as we see here, even amongst family members, and your son and your daughter, and your father and your mother, better off to, for the Torah's point of view, not to involve in gaining money or losing money for nothing. And I hate to call football nothing, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.
So, I just started dabbling in the stock market.
Okay.
It started in Corona and seeing so many things tank and recognizing this was a good time to buy.
Okay.
I do it through the app on my Chase app. I check my account balance every day, and I trade money transfer money from my checking account into my trading account, and then afterwards, I decide which stock I want to buy. So it's like what you were saying.
No, but that's still your account. That's still your money. It's your until you place a trade, it's always your money.
Okay, this was very.
But at the end of the day, when you buy a stock, technically and legally, you bought something. It could be a 1/1000000000% of Amazon, but you are technically legally owners of something.
But can't you say that about anything? So, for example, if you're in business.
Yes.
And you spend money on a gamble that investment might make you business.
Right.
I think if I buy a bigger sign.
So again, that's what I'm trying to say. We're disagreeing with this New York Times article. Risk taking is never forbidden.
Okay.
As long as it's part of business. So yes, cryptocurrency, at the end of the day, if it's legal, and it is, and if it's a real thing, which technically it is, anything people buy and sell, even if it's craziest gamble, using the term gamble to take a risk, then it's permitted according to Judaism, because there's no way that we forbade you from being risky. I mean, don't jump off a cliff, risky with bungee cord jump, but we don't forbid. There's nowhere that when it says you're not contributing to the world. There was never a directive to be. It was making money from nothing. But if you technically own a Bitcoin and if you an NFT or a day trade or a stock or whatever, or future or anything that's legal buying and selling, and there's regulations. So then, yes, you're risky. Again, that's the problem. The word gamble is sometimes synonymous with risky.
Right.
But when the Talmud forbade gambling, it didn't forbid risky behavior.
Got it.
It forbade making money from nothing. And that distinction, people make the mistake. Now, again, my point is all these are forms of gambling from the New York Times. Right. He made that mistake, according to the Talmud. He's entitled to his opinion.
Sure. Very interesting.
Thank you.
I have more questions. Let's turn the video off first.
Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day.